Hello and welcome to Dynasty Degens, episode 55. I am Nerdboy Takes, and as always, joined by Dane at FF_DaMadDog. DaMadDog, what's up, man?
Yo, what's going on, guys? Let's get into some theory tonight, won't we?
Yeah, the camera looks way closer to your face than it usually is. Are you just like is your face like up in the camera right now, or is that just how it always is?
I put the chair up a bit. I'm trying a different angle.
I think your head is growing, man. I think your head is just getting bigger and bigger as the weeks go on.
That's not good.
You got that Barry Bonds syndrome going on. But I want to introduce my buddy SamWise at Buy and Sell You. This is a first showing on Dynasty Degens. He hasn't been on before, so I welcome you to the show, man. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing good, and I think Dane is just really excited to talk theory, and that's why he's like so up close to the camera right now.
Yeah, he's like going to get closer and closer as the show goes on. Like his face is going to be, we're just going to get like his forehead by the end of the night.
By the end, it'll just be one big screen with his face on it.
Yeah, I would just like zoom in just on Dane, just like that. I just want the forehead and the nose in here. Dude, Sam, so tell me a little bit about how you got into Dynasty before we get going on this. Like, tell me what got you into this, what really like got the fire going, and then what got you into content after that.
Well, it's actually the other way around. I was into content first. I was just a sports writer, primarily because my boss was the managing editor at a website I was at, and he was the fantasy guy. So, and he was like, he ruled with an iron fist, wouldn't let anybody else write about fantasy. So I was just a sports writer, and I was writing articles about football, baseball, basketball, you name it. And then, kind of found my way onto Twitter, and I've always played fantasy football. I've been playing fantasy football since 1994, maybe. And so, I kind of ingrained myself in the fantasy space on Twitter or X, and then really kind of wanted to get further into it. So I started to join some redraft leagues and stuff like that with people that I met online. And then, like anything else, after people keep telling you, oh, you got to try Dynasty, or, oh, you got to try Guillotine. Oh, you got to try this. You're like, yeah, all right, I'll give it a go.
So Dynasty in general, I feel like if you're playing fantasy football, I didn't mean to cut you off, but playing fantasy football, I'd always compare it to drug use, because you're going to get in a redraft and that's a little marijuana. And you're like, all right, like it's not enough, right? You're like, this is okay, but like, you got to wait to get going. And then you're like, I don't want to wait anymore. So then Dynasty hits and you're like, all right, Dynasty's cool, but like, I want to get better at my rookie drafts. So I'm going to get into a Devu league. And then once you hit C2C, you're the equivalent of like, doing heroin at the 7-Eleven at, downtown.
Yeah, you're ready for the hard stuff.
Yeah, you're on the verge of a divorce, and you haven't seen your kids in like 3 weeks, So,
right.
But yeah, I love your stuff on the space. I know that we were actually in a couple chats in the off season together on Twitter or X or whatever, and I got to know you a little bit, and you were actually part of the Degens team now, which is awesome. And we're doing a lot of our redraft stuff. So we'll be doing redraft content and everything in between. But today we are actually talking Dynasty. So we are talking about Dynasty theory and ultimately your strategy of how you want to build a Dynasty team, the best way to ultimately open up your Dynasty team if you're in a draft, and then assessing that roster and then deciding your build and all that fun stuff. Before we do that, though, I know it's rookie fever, and I want to drop our sponsor. So we are fast drafting right now throughout all the offseason. We are doing the rookie drafts and pick fours and all that good stuff. So take a listen to a little Podfather action, and then we'll get going on this. 1 second.
Rookie. It's all about rookie talk in fantasy football right now. So why not go use all that knowledge to do something other than a mock draft? Chris Gimino won $8,000 with just 2 teams last year, and each draft took 5 minutes. That's pretty good ROI. You can start doing rookie drafts for money today on Fast Draft. The Origins tournament is live. It is the place to go and monetize your knowledge of rookies and use your favorite player profiler host promo code for a $25 deposit match. Now let's go start drafting faster.
All right. Yeah. So jump in to Fast Drafts if you can, and then you can use our promo code Degens and get $25 off there. But let's kick it off. So we're doing a dynasty. Let's talk a dynasty rebuild start. So if you're going to go into a dynasty draft, Dane, what is your preferred build as far as how you're going to go into a draft? Do you just play the board, or do you have a strategy when you first get in there?
Normally when I get into a startup, I'm always looking to do a 1-year punt. It depends who you have in your league. If you have some familiar faces, if it's all new managers, so you kind of got to snoop around and see what everybody's about and get to know them and build some of a rapport, see if anybody is looking to move up, and really go knocking on doors to see if that 1-year punt is going to work for you. If not, usually I'm just trying to go best player available or grab some value and see how the board falls to me.
Yeah, you have to have a set process when you go into a dynasty draft in general. You know, you have to look at it as, okay, so ultimately, like, learning your league is the most important. If they're valuing quarterbacks, if they're not valuing quarterbacks, if they're valuing wide receivers, if they're, you know what I mean? There's always going to be overvalues and undervalues like throughout the whole process. So getting an understanding of that value right away is very important. Usually a trade, the first trade that happens in a dynasty startup is what trickles down to the value throughout the entire startup. You know, you'll see somebody that they trade the 105 for the 110 in their first, you know. Already people are thinking, okay, you move back 5 spaces and that's equivalent to a first early on. And then you pretty much have to load up on these things and you have to go, okay, I have to overvalue this player, undervalue that player. It can be very frustrating, but I don't think you should ever make a decision on your builds right away. You know, like selling your first. I always suggest that you have to hold your first as long as you can throughout a season. You know, you can't just decide, okay, this first is going right away. Sam, how do you like to build? I know that you love to punt and do essentially a year 1 punt. And you've said that sets you up for success. How do you find that this first year punt really, you know, brings that success on later in the Dynasty League?
Well, first I'll piggyback on what Dane said. I think a lot of it depends on your competition. And kind of looking around the room. An important note right now is that Dynasty is really being saturated by redraft players that are making a move over. And, you know, they all they want to go gung-ho right off the bat. And so, frankly, if you're in a league like that, then punting is a great thing because you got 4 or 5 guys that are all going for the best players, and they're letting younger guys and guys that are still maturing drop to you. And maybe they're not even ready yet. You know what I mean? Maybe they're not going to perform in this first year that you have them, but you're like in the year after this, they're going to start jumping. So yeah, not only do I like punting in the first year of a startup, I also am notorious for taking over really bad orphans. There's just something about going in there and just blowing a team up and just, trading everything away and just awash with just tons of draft picks. I think I'm in a league right now. It's actually a best ball dynasty, and which is pretty tough, and there's some pretty smart guys in there. But I am on the 3rd year of having at least 5 picks in the first round. So I instead of doing the quick turnaround, I slow played it. But when I hit, I'm gonna hit for like 4 years in a row. I mean, last year I came up with Mervyn Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors, and Michael Penix and Bo Nix. You know what I mean? So I just blew everything up. I kept almost nobody. And that was fun for me. I mean, it's not fun to lose all season, unless you're just like, well, that's just one more first round draft pick for me. So this year I plan on capitalizing and continuing it for a couple years to come.
Yeah, you have to make that decision, right? Because you don't want to just be donating money every year. And
Right.
that's what people do when they're like stuck in that rebuild. And I find that that's difficult for people to get out of, because that rebuild is addicting to a lot of people. They're like, okay, I'm going to get this pick, that pick. I'm going to accumulate picks after picks. But they're never thinking about competing while they're doing that. It's more
Right.
about just getting the value of this player, getting the value of that player. So when you take over an orphan, I think the first thing that everything has to come into, as far as like what you should do, is assessing the players that will help you in a year's time if you are going to break it down. And then I always say like working a 3-year window, but like nowadays, like you just said, all these redraft guys that are coming into Dynasty, you have to work in shorter windows, because I have no idea how long a league is going to last unless I'm the commish of it. It's like really hard to be like, okay, this is going to be a 5-year league, a 10-year league. A lot of the times we see these leagues fold up, and you're like, okay, so I'm going to accumulate value for X, Y, and Z years. And then all of a sudden it's not going to exist anymore. So what I just, threw away whatever, $500 on a couple of years. And
that's the risk. That's the risk you take, if you're in a league with a bunch of redraft people that are more than willing to sell their draft picks in order to try to win. That's why some of these leagues really need to start making people pay for several years in advance, rather than just one, with the promise that you're coming back. But yeah, I mentioned that 3-year that 3-year work I'm doing in that league. I just really like that league, and I know it's not going anywhere, so I took my sweet time with that one. But normally I would shoot for by a year and a half I'm contending.
Yeah.
Again.
So I mean, so say you take over an orphan, right? And you're looking at your roster, you have an AJ Brown, a CMC type running back. So say, Derrick Henry, for instance, Saquon Barkley. You have these guys that can compete now, but your roster in general isn't even close to, like you have these 3 or 4 guys. So they're going to be sells, right? You're going to sell a Saquon Barkley. You're probably going to sell a Derrick Henry. AJ Brown is teetering on that. We might want to sell him. We might not want to, but he might never reach the value that you can get for him currently. Like he's in that realm of, he could be going back farther and farther every year, as opposed to, gaining value and staying where he is. Dave, if you're going to move off AJ Brown, if you just jump in, you got an orphan, you have AJ Brown, what are you going to do with him?
I'm going to try and sell AJ Brown. They're going into another season with a different OC. We've seen some of the flaws of Jalen Hurts trying to throw the ball, and I'm going to try and capitalize on the value that AJ Brown has, like you had said. So I'm going to go and try and tier down, whether I can get one player that is one tier below him, or maybe a little bit farther on a player that's going to gain some value and get a higher pick. I'm going to mix and match and see what I can extract from managers in my league.
Yeah. And to piggyback on that, understanding your league and knowing. So when I fire off trades in a league, I look at everyone's roster. And then I look at, okay, if Sam, you're in my league and you have Jalen Hurts and Anthony Richardson as your quarterbacks, there's no third quarterback on that roster, and I have 5 quarterbacks, you're a target. And I'm looking at you as, okay, I have Bryce Young as my quarterback 4 or whatever. I'm going to go after you, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to sell you Bryce Young, Would you add a plus to Bryce Young for AJ Brown right now? You'd have to, right?
You'd still have to.
You'd still have to. Would you accept Bryce Young in a third for AJ Brown? Or is that just not – are we just like not valuing him at all currently?
Well, I think it depends on the owner that you're trying to trade with, because anybody worth their druthers isn't going to take a third because they know it's just a dart throw. So I'd say you'd probably have to put a second with him.
Yeah, at this point, I think it's probably going to take a second. But if you're dire need of a quarterback, I just don't know where his value is right now. And it's fun to play around with. And I put him on the block a few times, and I've gotten some ancillary pieces back, and people don't really want to sell anything for AJ Brown right now, even though I don't think he's a major sell. Sam, do you have any major sells that you would want to get rid of when you take over a dynasty roster? Like, you would look at it and be like, okay, for me, it's always running backs. I want to get rid of running backs because the window for that to be valuable, you know what I mean? Like, if you're going to take over a team and you have Josh Jacobs, these guys that are like 27-ish, and they might not fit your win window, you know, as opposed to a wide receiver that's going to have that wider window to compete. So who would you be most willing to sell if you like took over like your biggest sells of the offseason? Just throw that out there.
Well, you know, last year, I'll put it in terms of last season, I told everybody to sell Travis Etienne because I thought there was no possible way he could duplicate the numbers he did last year. His efficiency was not great, but he scored a bunch of touchdowns. I told everybody to sell George Pickens. He's boom and bust, and that's okay in best ball, but that's not what you need as a stalwart in your lineup every week, especially the fact that he's a head case. But this year, it's all about identifying the guys that you don't think can repeat what they just did. And of course, there's going to be a couple where it's the one that got away. Boy, I was wrong about that. But for everyone, those are the ones you remember. What you forget about are all the ones that you were right on to sell, to get rid of at the right time. And you're laughing all the way to the bank. But I also think it's really important. And, I'm not way into Devy like you guys are. But it is way more important to know from Devy to college to the pros what next season's draft is going to look like. And so, last year I in all my leagues, I was just dishing off running backs like they were going out of style. Older ones, you know what I mean? Javonte Williams, and not that he's old, but guys that have been around a little bit that I was like, this guy's probably going to lose his job to one of these running backs that's coming out in the 25 draft. And I've got all these picks in the 25 draft. So I'll just get new ones that are only 21 years old. Even though the age restriction on running backs is way overblown. But yeah, so, I try to identify who's going to be available for me to replace if I'm ready to replace with a running back, and who I don't think can duplicate the same production from one year to another. It's all about consistency. Because if you can't count on the guy to do what he did the year before in any of fantasy football, then you're screwed.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a certain idea of these guys from a production level, and it is assumed that these guys will jump and drop off a little bit, just like we see in, it just happens. Age catches up to everybody, and that's just the reality of things. And then you see guys like Deontay Johnson just completely fade out into the oblivion, and there's really no explanation for that at all. And it gets frustrating, and that's what Dynasty is all about. There's no perfect way to do it, but if you are going to do it, what I suggest is an insulated trade. Dane, like what's an insulated trade to you? And what's an example of what you've done in the past as far as insulation goes?
You know, I'm sorry, did you say Dane? Go ahead, Dane.
Yeah, let's go to Dane real quick and then.
So an insulated trade for me is taking an asset at its peak value, tearing down to a player that can put up similar production, but might not be as ranked highly, and insulating that with, or getting a pick and insulating it with said player. Therefore, you're not just going and getting a draft pick that you might not have a great hit rate on, or you might not have a good scouting process to be able to capitalize on that. So you're being able to get a fallback plan and having that player that can still produce points for you and hopefully gain value and either be a core member of your team going forward, or you can repeat the process and build a bit of a war chest like Sam did with his previous team. And then when you're ready to step on the gas, you hit that league full throttle and your window is now maximized and maybe a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think, insulation is important because the idea is that you don't want to cripple your roster for years upon years. Like if you are going to sell a stud or even somebody that you're going to tear off of, the tearing off is important because you want that insulation of a pick. You want to get somebody, like if I was going to sell AJ Brown and I wanted to get somebody that was still productive, that could at least give me a couple of years of production, but also while that production tails off, you have that draft pick that is supposed to come in and actually hit, or supposedly just, at least give you some value at the back end of that. Last year I sold a couple aging vets for Cup and a pick, or, somebody that like is still going to give you a couple years or a year of production, but then you also have a first to back you up on that, or to help you out a little bit. And, I don't know if that's the way that you do it, Sam, but ultimately, like I want a player and a pick back. I'll never just sell a player for straight picks because nothing's guaranteed. And it's, the hit rate of picks, nobody has 100% on that. So,
yeah, I sold in the only time I've ever had Justin Jefferson. I didn't even have him for a whole season. I got him when he got hurt, and I bought him a little low because I had Jamar Chase on my team. And I sent Jamar Chase over. Then I held on to him because I was rebuilding, and so Jefferson wasn't winning me any games. When it came time to trade him, obviously it's Jefferson. We all know the going rate for him is multiple first-round picks. And I did that, but the sticking point in the negotiations was I needed a productive wide receiver back. And I managed to swindle my way into Brandon Ayuk. Now, he had a bad season this year, but that I felt like was a huge win. I got my first round picks. I got Ayuk in a tear down, and felt really good about that. But you can do that with a great many players. I can see, dishing off, Puka Nacua for like a Devontae Smith and a first. You know what I mean? Like that's plausible. Obviously, it depends on how savvy the other manager is. You agree, Dane?
I do. I think you nailed it by what you laid out there. I think that's a great way to build your team up too, and like I said earlier, be able to extend that window, and it makes you more fluid, right? When rookie season comes, we've all seen that where people want to overpay for certain rookie picks because their favorite analyst or they saw on Twitter that, this guy's going to go and rock the combine, and they might double count. And so then they overvalue, and that's where you can extract more value and just try to multiply that. And then all of a sudden you're going to make a juggernaut of a team.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's fun this time of the year because you can use that to your advantage. Like I've been doing a lot of rookie content. I did the rookie pod earlier today, and you're talking about where these guys are going to go in the draft. And most people that play in Dynasty have an idea of who's at the 107 right now, or who's at the 106. So the value of a pick is almost at a player currently. Even last year, people were still thinking, okay, like Ted McMillan's going to be there somewhere. And the idea is like, you're going after a player most of the time, and the value, it shouldn't be looked at like that. Obviously, like, it's really hard to just view it as a pick and that's it. But that's where you're going to get the most value right now, obviously holding it until the rookie draft. But right now, you're right, people are double counting. So if if somebody like Ted McMillan shows out in the cone drill and he's, there's videos of him flying around in his underwear, yeah, I think that 103, 104 range, it becomes extremely valuable. And it's not a bad time to tier back right now in rookie drafts either, because it feels like a flat line. Obviously there's some studs and stuff, but like, if you did this last year and you traded back in a rookie draft and you said, oh, I'm going to trade the 105 for the 111 and a future first, if you got traded the 105 for the 111 and a 26 first or 25 first or whatever, and you traded Rome Odunze for Brian Thomas Jr. in the first, it's all about knowing your process and understanding, how you view these guys, and you got to stand on business sometimes. But, if you can take advantage of this time of the year and you can take advantage of these guys, it can always look like a W. It can look like an L, but at least you went for it and you did it. I think, your hit rate can't always be perfect, but the idea is you're making these trades to elongate your win window. And that's the ultimate goal. I never want to have a roster that is going to just die. I've had these rosters where I compete, but knowing when to sell, even if you are going to give up on a player for 2 years, if you filled Derrick Henry last year, people are like, oh, you missed out on this year, but his value last year is better than this year, even after that big year. You know what I mean? And his value this year will be way better than next year, even if he has an RB1 season again, So even if these guys still produce, the value still isn't there, regardless of, like, if you got to sell Saquon Barkley right now. I don't care if he's the RB1 next year. He's not going to be where he is right now. I guarantee it. I can almost guarantee. What did he turn? He's 28, 27, 28. That age cliff and that idea in dynasty minds exists regardless of production. And that's just the reality, and that's the way it goes. It's like CMC was a second round pick last year. If you didn't sell him now, if you didn't sell him when that was going on, like, you missed the boat.
Right.
He's not touching the sixth round again, I don't think, even if he does come back. It's just, there's a lot of that concern. Medicals just change everything. And it's tough, man. It is crazy. But then I'm in a lot of leagues with you. I'm not in any leagues with Sam. I know how you build and what you do and how you move around. But if there's any guys that you want to buy right now in Dynasty for a rebuild, maybe some guys that you could get on the cheap, but might not help you immediately, but would definitely help you out for the future. And then these are the guys that we're talking about that you want insulated trades with, like if you were going to buy in on a rookie guy plus a first for a top tier, like you could have got Xavier Worthy in a first for AJ Brown. We're stuck on this guy, but just an example.
Yeah, I think like two guys that I'm trying to buy still is Rashee Rice. I'm trying to buy T. Higgins as well. Those are really pieces I like. If I can, I haven't really started snooping around yet, but I would like to go and buy Marvin Harrison Jr. I think right now his value is kind of at a low. Hopefully this offseason with Kyler, they're putting in the work and we see a better product on the field. Not that it was bad, but it definitely didn't hit the bar that the industry had set on him. So those are a few examples that I'm trying to buy right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think Marvin Harrison definitely got a bad rep as far as his production goes, but a lot of that fell on Kyler and the way that he dropped the ball, especially in the end zone a few times there. I think he could have easily had another 5 touchdowns last year if the ball placement was better. And Dude, Marvin Harrison, I don't think anybody's undervaluing him currently, but if you get somebody that is saying he's, like, would you trade? I would have him over almost every wide receiver besides Travis Hunter if he goes full wide receiver on us in this class. Would you trade the 103 for Marvin Harrison?
I would. Yep.
Yeah. What about you, Sam?
I would.
Yeah, feels right. What about the 102?
I'd feel pretty good about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's unfair that
for him, but
yeah, I feel like it's unfair that, and I know everybody said this ad nauseum, but there's only so many guys that come in and reach the bar that's been set for them in year one. It's actually way more rare. So just one, but there are dynasty players that are really finicky and they like to panic. So there are people out there right now, like, I should capitalize on Marvin Harrison right now because he's obviously no good. There are those people. I'm not one of them. But yeah, I'd dish off a 103 from Marvin Harrison, no problem.
Yeah.
I'm not dishing off Genty for him, but
yeah, and that's not to say that Marvin Harrison won't be better than Genty. It's just really understanding that the value there is not equal. It's not equivalent. We had a buddy that traded Ladd McConkey for the 101, and it's like, you want to support that, and I don't want to drop the name. I love you, buddy, but it's tough to see because the value, just, you're leaving a lot of meat on the plate as far as what you can eat up there, and that is a perfect example of you, even if you think that person's gonna outproduce Genty or outproduce the 101, that's still not the value in the trade market, and what you believe and then what you can get are usually vastly different for the most part. So you got to take advantage of that the other way. So like if you are buying, like if you bought Nico Collins 2 years ago, or these guys that are in the back ends, targeting year 3 guys, like Sam, you said, people are spoiled now because we have a long list of guys that come in and they are super productive, like from every class. We had obviously JJ, Chase, and and then Garrett Wilson had a monster rookie year, and it just like keeps going. And Ladd killed it this year, and then Brian Thomas Jr. And it's these guys.
Well, there's always, not to cut you off, but there's always a couple that are like the bar wasn't even set that high for them, and they just blew it out of the water. Rather not falling short, they just jumped right over it.
Yeah, but I mean, you're talking about Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody really had any expectation for him. He obviously, the Lions saw something and they believed in him, but I don't think any analyst said, okay, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the smash of the class. And if
right.
they to see the receipts of that, because I thought he was fool's gold for a year. And honestly, probably my biggest swing and miss at that point. I was selling him for. That's the thing with Puka, these guys are like, sell him for a second. If you can get any second for him, sell him for a second. And then it's like any first you can get, sell him for a first. And then it's like, dude, you got to stop. I hold on to things now. I was in that camp of sell while you can and get what you can. And it's Puka and Amon-Ra destroyed that mentality for me. Yeah. Then you can also, Jalen McMillan could fall off the face of the earth next year, but at this point you might be able to get him you might be able to sell him for a second. And it's like, do you want that? If you want to get a random second for Jalen McMillan, or do you want to hold and see if he has that trajectory? Not to say I loved him in college, so I think I would hold on to him, but would you sell McMillan for a second, Dane, if you had that opportunity?
I would sell him for a second if I could. If it's an early second, or more likely, I would try to use him in a package that I can try and tier up off of him. If somebody is really high and they're predicting that he's going to break out for the Bucks, that's the opportunity I'm going to take to go and get into the next tier wide receiver. I don't think I would take a pick straight up, but I would try to do it the other route.
Yeah. And for the guys that, all right, let me just hit you guys with a tier of wide receivers that I've been noticing go in the same range of startups. And you tell me if you believe in them for next year, or you think their production was mainly because they didn't have any target competition, or they didn't really like have circumstances were like favoring them as opposed to their talent was outweighing their situation. So it's like, all right, Marvin Mims comes to mind. So we got Marvin Mims over there, Jalen McMillan. Who else is in that range? Jameson Williams doesn't fit the mold. He already did have that little breakout. But for the sake of everything, I mean, I do want to talk a little bit about Jameson Williams, and as far as losing his OC and his production being incredible, but you know, like, are we still valuing him where he is? Trying to think of a third-year guy. Rashad Bateman comes to mind too. He's not a third-year guy, but he's also somebody that's been riddled with injuries the last couple years, and you can't really trust him, but he seemed to be borderline wide receiver 1B on that team this year, you know, on a team that was thirsty for players. So let's start with Marvin Mims. Do you think he's the real deal? Do you think that he's somebody that the Broncos build around, or is he going to get drafted over and become, you know, just the Marvin Mims of the first year that we saw? Sam, I'll go to you. How do you feel about him?
I think I don't have his stats in front of me from this season. I know that he came on pretty well in the second half, but I see that as being the top of his game.
Yeah, so we're thinking fool's gold with him.
What was that?
I was going to say like fool's gold, essentially somebody that, you know, if you can sell in the off season, you would sell. So you can label him as a sell in your mind, or a buy, or, you know, depending on the value currently.
Yeah, I don't see him reverting all the way back to, you know, when he first came in. But he's certainly, I mean, not that bad. He was the butt of a bunch of jokes, you know, to start with. What he did this year was impressive, and he's a good role player. But do I think he's going to do a whole lot better than that? No, I would sell him right now as fast as I could, probably.
Yeah. And Dane, is Jameson Williams a buy or a sell for you? I know that we're in a joint dynasty league that we just took him in, I believe the 8th round or so.
Yeah, I didn't mind taking him in the 8th round. Personally, I'm selling Jameson Williams. I think when you have a healthy Montgomery, you have Gibbs. I think Laporta kind of has a rebound season from what he did. Not that he was totally unproductive. He picked it up at the end of the year. But I just think Jameson Williams takes a back seat to the other pieces in Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, he is that guy, you know. He's somebody that is that go route boy, and he's fast as hell, man. So it's like he opens up the back end of that offense or that defense, and it's a necessary component in the way that they play, especially with Amon-Ra in the middle. Somebody actually compared Amon-Ra to Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy to Jameson Williams today, and it made so much sense to me. And in the way that their offensive run, and I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see Rashee Rice in that Amon-Ra St. Brown role once he's fully healthy, and then with Xavier Worthy working over the top and pretty much breaking out and pulling the defense and stretching it a little bit. So it's fun. Actually, we got Jamie jumping in the chat, and Jamie's talking about Josh Downs, somebody that I actually was meaning to include in that group right there. I love Josh Downs. I think he was criminally underrated. I think the NFL let him slip way too far in the draft. As a player, Josh Downs is incredible.
He's a stud.
Scares the shit out of me, though. I'll be honest. Like, he scares. It's the idea that he is working with Anthony Richardson for another year does scare me. But You love Josh Downs, Sam. What do you feel, and how do you feel about him as far as this year goes? Do you think he's going to?
I've been trying to buy Josh Downs ever since he was drafted. I just feel like he's a dog, and man, he plays hard on every snap. And yeah, first of all, I don't like Anthony Richardson. I said it from the beginning. And yes, I am petrified of him being stuck with Anthony Richardson. But then again, it's dynasty football, and I don't know how long he's going to be stuck with Anthony Richardson. I don't know if he's going to eventually become a free agent and go somewhere else. He'll still be young enough to be worth, plenty and really show out. So he's one of the few guys I might be willing to bury on my bench when I'm a big proponent of getting rid of any roster cloggers. I don't get married to names. I don't get married to guys I loved in the process. If I don't see them doing anything, then they're gone.
Yeah, Josh Downs, I think he's going to produce regardless. Like, he's not going to give you those monster weeks and those big production weeks or anything like that. But even with Anthony Richardson, he's going to have his floor is tough, but his ceiling is still very high as far as, what he can do in a week-to-week basis. And it just scares me because he could be in that QB purgatory range. We held on to Terry McLaurin, and he still pulled out 1,000-yard seasons, but we knew what Terry could be with a quarterback, and we saw what he was this year. Same with DJ Moore. We're like, okay, he's doing these 1,000-yard seasons, and it's like, we know what he is. He's not this. He's way better than this. And then he got over Chicago for that first year and was hyper targeted, and then obviously dipped down a little bit, but we know what DJ Moore is with competent quarterback play. And it's I think that's what we see with Josh Downs. He's he's so good. And you're like, man, he's great. He runs his routes. He's sharp. He knows how to separate, but he never gets catchable targets. And it might be frustrating for a couple of years, but I think he will eventually find a quarterback or a good situation. And it's tough, man. It's tough to hold on to these guys.
See,
how you feeling, Dan?
Well, I think I love Josh Downs. I have probably a 40% rostership of Josh Downs across 19 leagues. I love his route running. I love his hands. Unfortunately, he is a casualty of Anthony Richardson. So if somebody is going to come with the same idea or the same love for me as Josh Downs, I have to be player agnostic. And if I can extract value when I can get wide receiver X, Y, Z plus something for Josh Downs, and they're going to score relatively the same amount of points, I'm going to do that, because if it can fill up my roster or if it can help me get ready for my process of rebuilding, I'm going to go and do that. I don't think I'm going to be the guy that's going to sit and have Josh Downs on my bench for 3 years and hope that breakout finally comes or we get to see a consistent ceiling from him.
Yeah, I get that.
James
hitting it with the. Yeah, I mean, you can sell them the same if you want. How about Tillman? I mean, this whole offense is a huge question mark, and it actually. So I constantly talk about it. It's it's an ugly situation through and through. This, they've never been a beautiful fantasy landing spot as far as wide receivers, anything. The quarterback has been abysmal for forever. Having Winston there for 6 weeks was godsend. It was oh my God, we have fantasy points. We have stuff. Njoku is actually doing what he normally should be doing in a day-to-day process. So it's Tillman is great, man. I love Tillman coming out. I really like that air raid offense that he came from in college. I thought it was going to translate pretty well to the NFL. And we did see him almost in that same offense, because that's what they were running over there with Judy and him. So it was really working out pretty well until that injury. But I mean, I love Tillman. I just, if there's a 99% chance that we are seeing Cam or Shador over in on that team, right? Like we have to assume unless they free Kirk Cousins for a year but I don't think Kirk Cousins wants to die over there. Like I don't think he wants to spend his last year and a half or 2 years that he has wasting away in Cleveland right now. You guys like Tillman?
I do. I think the sample size was a little bit short, and that head injury worries me. The biggest rumors that I've been seeing now is that the Browns are seemingly all in on getting Cam Ward at quarterback, which would raise the stock of somebody like Tillman. I think he's somebody with the sample size that we got, albeit small, he produced. I'd be willing to hold on to him and see what we have there.
Sam, do you think that
if
Tillman comes back healthy, would you want Tillman or Judy in that offense? Sam.
I would take Judy.
Yeah.
I like Tillman a lot more, but if I'm making a roster decision, I would take Judy first.
Yeah. Yeah, I think value there in general makes sense. But I mean, we never really saw Judy doing the Judy stuff while Tillman was fully healthy. Like Judy was fine, but like he didn't really like totally launch out until Tillman came down with that injury. So it's like, is Judy still going to produce at that type of level with a healthy Tillman and maybe another wide receiver in the draft or some random free agent that they can sign? Or I don't know. It's very iffy, but we have to imagine that they're going to get a immediate upgrade at quarterback. And I think that whole offense is pretty cheap. Even Njoku is like way back in startups. And I think you could probably get him for, I don't know, like what are you buying Njoku in a TEP league at this point? Maybe 205, 206. Like, I honestly think you could probably get him for a mid-second at this point.
Yeah, I think you're getting him for a mid-second. Going back to Judy, I would rather hold on to Tillman. I just want to see that sample size. Judy, he's been around in the league enough that he's shown flashes. There hasn't been enough consistency. And again, it kind of goes into that wide receiver glob that if somebody's going to come and give me, what do we see him going for at the end of the year in his hot stretch, early seconds? Like I'll take the pick all day over Judy.
I mean, I think in Discord, we were seeing Judy for a first, actually, a couple times. I think we saw that in the Jimmy Butler league not that long ago.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I mean, that was also, end of season push, but, trading a first for Judy seems, I don't know.
I think that's preposterous with
absolutely.
With quarterback situation.
Yeah, and that's the value of Judy 4 years ago. That's the rookie Denver Broncos Judy, that kind of value that we're talking about there. The one thing I want to touch on before we go, since we're talking about mid-tier wide receivers and guys that, could be breakouts, could not be breakouts, and who you want to buy, who you want to sell. What about the Green Bay offense? We saw that Josh Jacobs came out and pretty much roasted that entire offense and just said, we don't have any wide receivers. We don't have a wide receiver one on this team. Is there anybody on that roster as far as pass catchers go that you want to buy up in Dynasty? Dane, I'll go with you.
I think depending on the price with Jaden Reed, I know we saw him at astronomical prices last year, but he just wasn't getting the target share and he wasn't putting the product on the field that we wanted to see. Depending what his value is now, I think he'd be the one guy that I would try to buy because I think he has a little bit different characteristics than we have from Wicks, we have from Dobbs. Watson's obviously out. So Reed would be the one receiver that I would want to own off of that team.
Yeah. What about you, Sam? In Dynasty this offseason, if you were going on the market for a wide receiver, do you want anybody at value?
I'm not interested in any of those wide receivers at value. The only person I'd be willing to buy is Tucker Kraft.
Sure. I get that. Yeah. I don't mind that at all. I mean, I think there's the tight end landscape is pretty insane right now. I mean, we have to imagine that we're probably going to get at least 3 to 4 decent starting tight ends in this draft class, right? And that's bare minimum. I think we could easily get 6 starters out of this draft class. It's a very strong tight end class through and through. And we are looking at teams that, like Mark Andrews, with likely really looking like he's up for a starting role at this point. A lot of teams that I don't know where these guys are going and where they're playing, and it's really hard to value anybody, especially running backs, but specifically the tight end position. I could see like a really top fantasy producing tight end, not top, I'm sorry, but like a Njoku or somebody that you would actually value pretty well in Dynasty, get drafted over, or get a pretty good running mate on that team. So it's tough. It's really scary to even buy right now for the most part. But we know that the running back class is strong. We're talking about rebuild. We're talking about how to build around the team and what you should do. Are there any running backs that we want to touch on before we sign off here that you want to tier off? Like I said, Saquon Barkley, if you were able to acquire a Bucky Irving or a Kyron Williams in past drafts and stuff like that for nearly nothing, you lucked out. But if I was going to sell Barkley right now, Dane, is there anybody that you would target? Somebody that maybe hasn't hit or hasn't really peaked out in dynasty value yet?
One guy that I would try to tier down to, I think you're going to disagree because I think you're out on him, but I'm pretty high on Kenneth Walker going into next year. I think that's one guy that I would try and tier off on Barkley. Get a little bit younger. We're going to see a different scheme with Clint Kubiak in Seattle. So I'm getting pretty excited about Kenneth Walker, and I think he's going to ascend in value this year.
Yeah, I got Chef talking. James Cook. I think James Cook's the perfect.
That's perfect.
If you're looking at Barkley, you can get James Cook in a first or someone in that range. I think that's probably a good tier down. Sam, if you're going to sell Barkley right now, is there somebody you want to sell for specifically, or do you just want to get the best value?
You know what? James Cook would be a great one. If I'm contending, then, I guess I'm just trying to, if I'm contending, I'm probably going to play Saquon for another year. So if I'm not, I'm probably going to target a wide receiver instead. If I'm middle of the pack, because that's what I do. I don't get the running backs until I'm, in the top 3 of the league and ready to push the envelope.
Yeah, for the sake of the conversation, let's just say we're going for running backs, and it's like, okay, we know this draft class is coming in. We know that everybody has 5 or 6 running backs that are NFL ready, and it could be melee. They all could be coming in the first day or two in the draft and coming into backfields that already have a legitimate starter. But, if you had a Bucky Irving, like, if you just were like, okay, I want to tear down while still competing and get a lot younger on this aging out dynasty roster, would you rather have Bucky Irving or Saquon Barkley, just straight up at this moment?
Again, if I thought I was going to compete this year, I would keep Saquon, but I would tear down if I'm even 1 year away.
What about you, Dane?
Because he's going to lose value. He can't do this year again.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take Bucky, just because of the age. We've seen him come in and totally dominate that backfield from Rachaad White. He was utilized in every situation, right? He just got control of that backfield. He's got, I want to say, a little bit more receiving upside than Saquon Barkley, and with Godwin out, I think they're going to end up leaning on Bucky Irving a little bit more. And yeah, if I can reset the clock but get the same production, I'm going to take Bucky for that reason.
Yeah, Jamie's asking, what would you need added selling Barkley for Hampton Plus? So that plus I would have to do. So I would definitely need Hampton and a first for Barkley and a fourth, or like just to juice up, because we're thinking Hampton is going to be the 10, we'll say the 104 to the 107. You know, we'll just say that's
Yeah.
probably the value in a rookie draft. I probably have Barkley at the 103.
Yeah.
So if you're talking the 106, 107, yeah, I would probably need a random first, and I would add a ancillary pick, something that looks okay but really means nothing to Barkley. You know,
Yep.
That's my favorite thing to do. I throw those fourths on anything. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'll put a fourth on a player and for a third. I don't give a shit. So it's like you take that fourth and you do whatever you want with it. And people still have this mentality that could be Puka, so they're going to buy it. They're going to take it. So you can make it look fancy with a fourth on top. But I don't know. Where in pick value do you guys have Barkley right now?
Yeah, I'd say he's about the 102 or the 103 for me. So it really depends how your draft board goes and when you're on the clock, if Hampton's available, kind of where he's sitting. But I agree with you. Like, I'm probably going to need a random 26 first, even a 27 first, before people start to look at that draft class. And if I have to add in a third or a fourth or add in some kind of a roster clogger to get that done, I'll go and do that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you boys today. Sam, drop any content that you have coming up or anything that you want people to follow in the next couple of weeks or next couple of days or whatever.
Obviously, you can find me on Twitter at Buy and Sell You. And then if anybody's interested, tomorrow night I'll be on From the Forum with the Fantasy Advice Network at 10 o'clock. Prior to that, and we'll be talking some combine stuff. Prior to that, we'll be talking free agency landing spots and our dream landing spots and trades we'd like to see over on the Yards Per Fantasy Network at 8:45.
Awesome. Sam, I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Dane, and for sign off, you got anything going on?
No, man. I just love that we're getting into this theory. That's kind of my bread and butter since I got into this. It seems like the majority of my profile is orphans, so I'm just always working on my process, and I'm going to continue to make notes and drop them in the Discord.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Yeah, if you guys aren't in our Discord, definitely DM me, DM Dane, DM Sam, anybody. You can hop in there. We have trade advice 24/7. We do a lot of startup help. We are essentially there to answer any questions you have. We have rankings. We talk about player value, and it's just really ongoing 24/7 dynasty help, redraft help. We're in Devi over there. There's a channel for essentially every need that you have in fantasy. So like I said, if you guys need some help or if you want to just come in and talk ball for the day, join Dynasty Degens Discord, and then we can get you going on that. As far as me, I am doing the Rookie Profiler series next week. I'm joined by Matt Waldman. So you can see that live. We're going to drop that Thursday at 8:30. So Thursday, 8:30 next week. You can catch that. Otherwise, we will see you next week on Dynasty Degens. Thank you.